behind the line. Every morning we'd get up for a piss and a cigarette, and one of the mornings we hear a shh, which was closer than usual. So we all looked up, and there was a Russian cruise missile about 75 or 100 meters above us. That was a good thing to see. It wasn't any lower. That would have hit us.
Let's go! Gunner, let's go!
You get told to storm a trench. I remember the first time we practiced it, where you drive the Humvees, and I was in the back of the Humvee training, and then get out of the Humvee, and then once I heard like the 50 cals and everyone getting out of the Humvee and just sending it, I was like, I think a week or two later I got to do it for real.
We're good, boys! Let's fucking kill these cats!
It's a funny story actually. I was in the car with my mother, and I was working for a while to kind of save up money, and I said, I need to tell you something, and she goes, who the fuck did you get pregnant? And I was like, I didn't get anyone pregnant, ma'am. She goes, well, you're not going to fucking Ukraine. And I was like, I didn't even tell you what I want to say yet. And she's like, what do you want to say? I was like, I'm going to Ukraine. And she flipped the lid for a while, hid me passport and everything. So I always taught myself as a good soldier, so I wanted to actually see if I was as good as I thought. So that's why I wanted to go.
No, leave it. Fuck me.
That is a 21-year-old Irish man in battle in Ukraine. The volunteer fighter serves with Chosen Company, a unit that is attached to Ukraine's 59th Brigade. Chosen Company is made up mostly of foreign volunteer fighters, in a unit that specialises in trench assaults.
We're good, boys! Let's fucking kill these cats!
That's Chosen Company and vehicles racing towards a Russian trench in the eastern front line in Avdiivka in Donetsk.
We're good! Anyone here? No!
My name is Jeff Farrell, and I have been reporting on the war in Ukraine since the early months of Russia's invasion. My stories included trips to the eastern front line in Kupiansk, Kyiv Oblast, to hear what the Ukrainian soldiers desperately want to stay in the fight. What do you need from the West to win this war?
Артиллерия, танки.
Ammo, artillery, aviation.
I also reported in Mykolaiv in the south of Ukraine, where I was forced to flee a hotel at night when Russia attacked the area in a missile strike.
Shit. We are badly under attack now. Get Jeff out of the building now.
There's been shelling here for the last 20 minutes around the hotel. Despite the dangers, I always got to leave Ukraine and go home. Others, however, such as volunteer Irish fighters, choose to stay. They advance towards bombs and bullets, when the rest of us run the other way.
It started before dawn. Ukraine woke to explosions around the capital, Kyiv.
As an Irishman, I was fascinated to find out more about what drove men from my home country, Ireland, to travel to the other side of Europe to fight, to go to battle with Russia's massive military machine, and possibly go home in a body bag.
Rory Mason had enlisted to fight in the war in Ukraine when the conflict broke out last March. On Thursday of last week, the Department of Foreign Affairs contacted his family to tell them he'd been killed in action.
I had been tracking down Irish fighters in Ukraine for months to get their story, and one fighter I managed to line up for an interview was the young Irish fighter who goes by the codename Irish. We met in a hotel in Kyiv where I spoke to him about his several near-death experiences while fighting off Russian troops. Chosen Company launched this assault on the Russian front line in the Avdiivka area in July 2023. The Irishman, who, for security reasons, can only give his call sign Irish, took part in the battle. He has had many close encounters with death, and not always just in battle. In an exclusive and recent interview with me in Kyiv, he recalls one such incident.
So one morning we, in bunkers behind the line, every morning we'd get up for a piss and a cigarette, and one of the mornings we hear a shh, which was closer than usual. So we all looked up, and there was a Russian cruise missile about 75 or 100 meters above us. So that was a good thing to see. It wasn't any lower. That would have hit us, but don't know where that went. But it wasn't for us, thankfully.
What did you do when you saw the missile? Did you take cover?
No, we just stood and watched it and continued to piss or smoke cigarettes. At that point, if it's that close, it doesn't really matter what you do. If it wants to hit you, it's going to hit you.
When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 22, Irish recalled how he was then serving in the British Army.
Yeah, I was in the infantry of the British military for a while, and then from there I decided to come over here and actually get to see some combat and do some good, hopefully. So that's what I've been doing for the past about a year now.
So you went to join the British Army expecting to see some service overseas, and then nothing happened?
Yeah, I was hoping for it. And when Russia invaded Ukraine initially, everyone was put on standby to possibly deploy, and it was like 12-hour standby, and then it went up to 24 hours, 48 hours, and then it never happened. So that was probably the most exciting thing that was going to happen, and unfortunately it didn't happen. So they wanted us to go to, it was then NATO started deploying to the Baltics and Eastern and Central Europe to bolster up NATO's defence there, but not actually doing anything. Obviously the aid and stuff helps, but it didn't feel good to sit back and do nothing and play soldier instead of actually doing it for real.
Irish told how he felt the urge to travel to Ukraine to put his fighting skills into action. It came after the horrors of Russia's invasion emerged in the international news. That included Moscow's occupation of areas north of Kyiv, including in Bucha. Horrific tales of rape and mass murder emerged.
This is not a special operation. This is not military objects. This is civilians. They've been shot in the head with the tied hands behind their back.
After Kyiv's forces liberated Bucha, Vladimir Klitschko, the brother of Kyiv Mayor Vitaly, visited the city. He posted a video on social media from Bucha that showed dead bodies.
This is genocide of the Ukrainian population. And that's exactly what Russian regime, Putin's regime, Russian army is doing, killing the civilians.
The harrowing accounts of mass murder of civilians by Russian forces in Bucha, which Moscow denies, spurred on Irish to quit the British Army to fight Moscow soldiers in Ukraine.
The main probably thing, so I was big into history and what happened in World War II. There's a village in France that I went to see. It's called Ordor-sur-Mer, where it's left the way it was when the SS came in and killed everyone. And it's a museum now. So I went there when I was younger, and then when I think it was mainly Bucha, the similarities between it, I thought it was clear black and white, and I always used to look up to people or even Irish people going to places like that to fight. And I said, I think if I don't do it now, I'll look back and regret it in the future, because I had the opportunity, and I wanted to see combat. I always thought myself as a good soldier, so I wanted to actually see if I was as good as I thought. So that's why I wanted to go.
Irish first spent time back home in Ireland, in his home county that borders Dublin, which he asked not to be named for security reasons. His plan was to spend time with his family before he travelled to Ukraine to fight Russia's military. But first he had to break the news to his mother.
It's a funny story, actually. I was in the car with my mother, and I was working for a while to kind of save up money, and I said, I need to tell you something. And she goes, who the fuck did you get pregnant? And I was like, I didn't get anyone pregnant, Mom. She goes, well, you're not going to fucking Ukraine. And I was like, I didn't even tell you what I want to say yet. And she's like, what do you want to say? I was like, I'm going to Ukraine. And she flipped the lid for a while, hid me passport and everything. So eventually I got it all sorted, and she kind of accepted it. But yeah.
So she knows the kind of character that you are, and that you had an eye on Ukraine.
Yeah, I never really mentioned it, but I think at the time I left the army, she kind of knew. She probably thought something would come up or I'd try it, and she was right. So here I am now.
After Irish made his decision to fight for Ukraine, he set about planning how to join Kyiv's military. That involved contacting Ukraine's International Legion, as well as reaching out to an Irish soldier already fighting in Ukraine. He then packed his bags and travelled in May 2023.
Got to Poland, got to the border. I had 2 bags.
Hi there. The Irish fighter in Ukraine featured in this documentary with the codename Irish has been helped in Ukraine by the aid group Protect the Volunteer. To learn more and to give a donation, see protectthevolunteer.com. For now, enjoy the documentary.
And I walked up to the border post, and everyone kind of seen what I was doing, so a lot of them moved to the side and said go on. And I got to the border. She's like, what city are you going to? I was like, I don't know. She's like, what are you doing here? I was like, I want to join the army. I want to go fight. And then she goes, okay, wait here. Takes my passport, and then a few hours later some soldiers came and threw me in the back of a van and then drove me somewhere. Sat in that building for a while, and then I started they collected me, and there was another one of us, an American guy, and we started our recruiting process.
He soon signed up to Ukraine's International Legion and began his training in the Yavoriv military base in Lviv in western Ukraine.
It has been 4 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, and during that time thousands of foreign soldiers have joined the fight against Russian forces.
The latest recruits are being welcomed by their commander.
And I hope you will stay here to protect Ukraine, to fight for Ukraine, to kill Russian by your rifle. Is it clear? Yes.
I initially joined the Legion, 2nd Battalion, and that was in Yarviv. We were there for a while, like training constantly. Trained, like all of us knew each other very well, which I think really helped us in the future. But at the time, I don't think we were pretty angry about just sitting there. And like every 2 weeks, you'd see a new batch of Ukrainian mobilized guys who'd come in for 2 weeks, and then they'd go straight to the front, and they don't really want to fight. And then you have all these guys there that really want to fight, and they're being held back for whatever reasons.
Irish eventually tired of waiting to be sent to the front line while he was part of the International Legion in Ukraine. Things changed when an American fighter, Ryan O'Leary, was tasked to command a unit called the Chosen Company, which would be attached to the 59th Brigade. O'Leary spoke to the foreign fighters, including Irish, in the Yavoriv military base. Irish quickly signed up to Chosen Company.
We got fed up of it after a while, and then Ryan O'Leary came out to us one day, and we all trusted Ryan at that point anyway, and he said, he's looking for units, and he was like, called a meeting, and he's like, said the 59th Brigade, and he goes, and we asked what we'd be doing, he's like, well, storming trenches in Donetsk, and I think everyone was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. So we got there, and everyone was really excited and ready to go. We started training, we got all our contracts sorted, and then we kind of got an idea of what we were going to be doing, and then we started going from there.
Had you any idea what it would be like to storm a trench with enemy soldiers?
No, so that was one thing I never learnt on that scale in training. Like all the videos I seen at the start of the war, the battles in Kyiv, and it was all like urban, and it looked cool, and then you get told to storm a trench. So we practiced and practiced. I remember the first time we practiced it, where we rehearsed it and drive the Humvees, and I was in the back of the Humvee training, and then get out of the Humvee, and then once I heard like the 50 cals and everyone getting out of the Humvee and just sending it, I was like, yeah, this is one of the coolest things I've done. And then I think a week or two later I got to do it for real, so that was good.
Or doing it or waiting, what was more frightening?
So before, like, we rehearsed it so many times, and we were excited to do it. The scariest bit to me was always the waiting. It's because you have to go in the night before and set up, hide the Humvees, because when the attack comes, you need to be as close as you can without them knowing you're there to start the attack. So you're sat in a shelter belt, which is like a forest with trees. It's like a skinny forest, and we hid the Humvees, and then we all sat around. And you've no phone, you've nothing to distract yourself except for the lads and smoking cigarettes. And then that's the scary bit, because I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Your mind starts to fucking freak you out. But no one's gonna show it. Once you get in the Humvee and you hear the words on the radio that you're going, then the fear leaves you. You kind of just start to think about what you're about to do, and figure out or think about your job, and just focus on what you're meant to do.
We're good! Anyone here?
So at this stage, you're in a forest area, you're waiting to storm the trench. I mean, how far are you from the trenches at this stage?
Only a few minutes. You're only a few minutes away, and the Humvee drivers, they're really good. They're Ukrainian, but they absolutely they send it as fast as they can on that Humvee, because as soon as the enemy see you, they're gonna try to hit you, whether it's FPV drones or artillery, and they're pretty good.
So basically, you go in the about 20 or 30 men in the back of a Humvee. You have your gunner on top. He's blasting away.
Yeah. So I wish it was 20 or 30 men, but so usually it's like mutual assaults. So there'll be different groups. In our group, there's generally, like for a trench, could be 10 or 20. It depends on the trench system. That one was 3 Humvees with probably 12 or 15 guys.
Okay. Ready? Fragile.
So there's two closed back Humvees, and then there's an open top Humvee as well. So them guys are pretty exposed.
So you get to the trench, the adrenaline is pumping. They're firing drones at you, and they're firing mortar back at you, I presume. So what's it like when you hop into the trench? Is it man-to-man, hand-to-hand combat? Can you see the faces?
You need to find the trench first and find your entry point. So that's the main thing. And you're getting shot at by, each Russian position will support each other. So that position in there might not necessarily be shooting at you, but other ones will. So you need to find your entry point, which can be difficult because it just all looks like holes in the ground because of the shelling. And then once you get in the trench, you're not really thinking. I wasn't thinking. It was just autopilot. The bunkers that they're going to be in, and you just throw grenades or throw explosives in there. Afterwards, yeah, you see bodies, but you clear that bunker. You climb over them, make sure it's clear, get back out and radio up it's clear, then you continue on. And you don't really think about it. I think it's, if you see someone, it's usually a body, it's explosives or whatever. You don't even realize maybe sometimes, but you just continue on. It's not anything at that time. It's sweet, it's clear, and then you move on. Whether there's no one in it or there's people in it, it's okay, it's clear, and then you continue on throughout the trench.
We're good! Anyone here?
So the job is basically to shoot everybody dead, the enemy soldier, and if they don't surrender, you shoot them dead. If they surrender, you take them captive.
If they're fighting back, anyone in that trench wearing a fucking Russian uniform, or sometimes they're not even wearing uniforms, they'll die. If someone does surrender, we'll have people there who speak Russian, and then we'll coax them out and search them, make sure they've nothing on them, and then they'll be put in a separate bunker. Sometimes they won't, sometimes they will. And then after that, once the Ukrainians come and relieve, they'll be handed over to who they need to be handed over to.
So you don't think about the dead at the time, the people that you've killed. It's just a job to do.
Yeah, it's just you continue, and then your main focus is on everyone else, but your injured people, who's injured, what's their injury, and then how to treat them, and then to set up so after the assault, you need to defend the trench. So you go straight into your defensive phase, and then looking after your wounded, and then if there's a counterattack, if Russians try again, which oftentimes they will, they'll try counterattack, and they'll fucking throw everything, mortars, artillery at you for until nighttime. Generally, they'll smash smash you with mortars. So
no, leave it. Fuck me.
Just you wait there and deal with the artillery and the mortars and drones, and if there's any Russian infantry, you'll deal with them as well.
So I think you recalled an incident when we spoke earlier that you were in a trench and one of your colleagues got injured with shrapnel.
Yeah, there's a few of us at the end of the trench. Everyone spread out throughout the trench. I think the Russians' main assault was going to come from that direction, their main counterattack. So the mortars were mainly zeroed on that part. So you could see you could literally see the mortars there landing on the lip of the trench. I still don't know how one didn't land in the trench. A lad sitting across from me, mortar hits the lip of the trench, and then he gets some shrapnel to the chest just beside the plate carrier.
And he survived?
Yeah, he was grand. Thankfully it wasn't too bad. Once we realised he was grand, he was a big lad, so the first question we asked was, are you able to walk? And then once he said he was able to walk, we all kind of had a sigh of relief, because he would have been a tough man to carry out of there.
So when the Russians are firing at the trenches at this day, when they know you've stormed it, when they realise, they don't know if their own men are killed. Sure, they don't. I mean, their own men could still be alive in that trench.
Yeah, Russians don't give a fuck. Even in positions that our lads have stormed in villages, they've been on top of the position, and Russians are in it, and they're still trying to hit in the position. So as soon as the Russians know the assault's going on, they don't really rely on their infantry. Especially once you're in the trench, there's not really much chance for the infantry, so the Russians are like, whatever, and we'll just start shelling you as soon as they can.
So they're basically shelling their own men, rather than take a risk of losing a frontline position.
Yeah, they'll shell their own guys, and then if their own guys retreat, often you'll see them come on back straight after. So yeah, the Russians, the guys on the very front of the line, are generally conscripts or ex-prisoners. So the Russians they don't care, and Russians don't care about any sort of human life. It's not something you can look back in the Battle of Stalingrad, how many Russians died there for one city. The Russians don't care, and it's not that far different now. Where in Stalingrad there was one man got a rifle, one man got ammunition. You pick up the rifle or you pick up the ammunition from whoever dies. It's not that far-fetched from reality still today.
Hi there. If you're enjoying this documentary on the war in Ukraine, you might be interested in my audiobook, The Cocaine Diaries. It details a war of another kind. An Irish drug mule struggled for survival in a prison in Venezuela where inmates fought battles armed with automatic weapons and grenades. You can listen to The Cocaine Diaries, a Venezuelan prison nightmare, as an audiobook on platforms including Spotify and Amazon's Audible. For now, enjoy the documentary. These are the battle sounds of Chosen Company fighting as it tries to push through in the village of Pervo-Mayske, just 15 kilometers northwest of Donetsk city in the east of Ukraine. The mission was not a success, and 2 American soldiers died. Chosen Company was forced to withdraw and regroup. Irish was not injured that day, but has been hurt in battle, although not seriously. He said he was hit on his arms and legs with shrapnel, but recovered quickly. After my interview with Irish, we went to a bar where the best stories always come out. There, he recalled that another Irish fighter got shot in the rear end.
Before the actual mission started, he took a round in the ass. Because it was still night time, he was told to evacuate, get in a medevac and get his wound treated. He refused to go back and said, I came all the way fucking out here. I'm not going home. Just a few minutes in, and then continued to fight 14 hours through the whole battle with a bullet in his ass. He got shot in the ass. He felt it straight away and just kept going. He said, I came all the way out here. I'm not going home then. I just put a bandage on it and continued through it.
Other Chosen Company fighters have survived injuries too. Irish told that one Irishman lost an eye after he was hit with shrapnel. The man, in his late 20s, has since quit the war and returned home to the west of Ireland. Another Irishman was shot in the head, but the bullet embedded in his helmet and he lived to fight another day.
So you were in battle one day and you heard an Irishman was injured. What was the injury that you heard that the Irishman had?
An American came up to me and told me the Irish guy, one of my very good friends, was shot in the back of the head. Obviously, I presumed he was dead. And I continued to the cellar to get checked by a medic. And my friend who I was told got shot in the head and I presumed was dead was there smoking a cigarette. So I asked him, heard you got shot in the head? And he said, yep. And then asked him, was he okay? And he said, a bit fucked up, but yeah, he was grand. He continued to smoke a cigarette.
What was the extent of his injuries then?
A bullet to his head, it just about penetrated his helmet, but didn't penetrate his skull. And so he had a pretty bad brain injury. He had hearing loss and some temporary blindness as well from the injury. Yeah, after a week and some medicine, he was back fighting again.
Not all men survived the front line. By early 2024, 3 Irishmen have been killed in battle in Ukraine. They were Rory Mason, Finbar Cafferty and Graham Dale, a chosen company fighter.
On Friday, Dubliner Graham Dale was killed on the front line in Ukraine. It's understood that the 45-year-old from Raheny had travelled to Ukraine shortly after the Russian invasion last year and went on to join the Ukrainian army.
He was slain while successfully defending a frontline position outside the city of Avdiivka in the village of Pervomaiske. This came amid Russia's main assault on Avdiivka in a push that began in October of 2023.
Huge Russian armoured columns advanced on the city from the north, west and south, hoping to pin the defenders inside and surround them with a pincer movement.
The assault and Kyiv's bid to defend the city, a strategic site, was said to be one of the bloodiest battles of the war.
And the casualties they managed to inflict on the Russians are staggering. Tens of thousands of men dead and injured, thousands of tanks and armoured vehicles lost.
Graham Dale had previously served with the US military in Iraq after he had emigrated to America more than 2 decades ago. In Ukraine, his commander and chosen company, Ryan O'Leary, had also served in Iraq. I spoke to O'Leary by phone for an exclusive interview just days after Dale was killed in December 2023, with O'Leary hailing Dale as a hero.
We're fighting in an urban type environment, but it's all rubble, so all the positions are close to each other. The Russians managed to break through that afternoon, and basically Graham and I think 4 or 5 Ukrainians, instead of just holding out in the bunker or retreating, they basically left the fortified position and moved forward and engaged the Russians that had surrounded another position. So we told them just to hang and wait, but him and the Ukrainians just said fuck it, I guess, and pushed forward. So they ended up stopping the Russian assault and preventing the forward position from getting overran. So the friendly Ukrainian forces that were in that position were basically stuck inside of a bunker and they weren't able to defend themselves. And basically what Graham did with the Ukrainians, they went out, they killed all the Russians. So he was actually injured by a drone, like a FPV or a drop drone, and he also was hit with small arms fire. But basically they went out and they killed all the Russians, and during the firefight he was injured, but they prevented the Russians from taking the Ukrainian position and killing the friendly forces in front of them. Ultimately he was killed while doing it.
Dale first travelled to Ukraine in May 2022 to do humanitarian work, which included the delivery of vital aid to areas in need. The Irishman, however, later took up arms to fight with the Ukrainian military against the Russian invader.
I know one of his reasons he thought was because what the Russians were doing was wrong, with the bombing of the civilian, the constant missile attacks on civilian areas, the Bucha stuff. I also think for him it was another shot at, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't say redemption, but a lot of Iraq vets have not really second guesses, but we often wondered, were we doing the right thing? Did it make a difference? And I think he knew he could make a difference here. here, and that's what he was doing. He was good with machine guns. He was an asset to the company.
I visited Maidan Square in Kyiv, where there is a memorial to both men and women who have been slain by the Russian military in Ukraine. That includes foreign fighters such as Irishmen Dale, Cafferty and Mason. Their names are written on an Irish tricolour flag. Just as I was about to leave my hotel, an air raid warning wailed across the city. It was a warning of yet another potential Russian attack, such as a missile or drone strike. In the end, no airstrike came, and I made my way to Maidan Square.
That's the air raid siren ending. I'm just walking around the Maidan Square in Kyiv, where there's a garden area opposite the main road where there's dozens, couple of hundred flags, several hundred flags dedicated to Ukrainian and foreign fighters who have been slain in the war. They include Irishmen Rory Mason, Finbar Cafferty and Graham Dale. So I'm just standing opposite the tricolour flag at the moment. It's lying limp, but a gust of breeze brings it up and down from time to time. And you can see the names of those 3 Irishmen on that flag in the middle of the square, in the middle of the green area. I'd love to talk to somebody in English for reaction about what they think about Irishmen coming to Ukraine to fight. There's a lot of people here in tears, paying their respect to loved ones. So it's a difficult topic, it's difficult to get somebody to speak. But of course I'm going to try. I'm sorry, do you speak English? No, people are nodding their head and walking away. They don't want to speak to a journalist. They probably do speak English, but don't want to, but that's okay. Here at the memorial, I met a New Zealander of Irish descent who hailed the 3 slain Irish fighters as heroes.
The impression I get from reading comments online about the involvement of some Irish people, some Kiwis, is that it's not their fight, right? To me, as a plastic paddy, seems particularly obscene. Of course the Irish belong in the fight. To me, it's obvious, so yes, it's this, but hey, fuck it, it's war, eh? No one is asking the Irish to come and fight, but, you know, as a person of Irish culture and Irish origin, I have a lot more natural appetite anyone Irish doing something than fucking sitting in the couch having a good time criticising people who do stuff.
Graham Dale, who was 45, was laid to rest in early January 2024 in Dublin. I wasn't in the city at the time, but viewed the funeral service online.
Graham voluntarily surrendered his own freedom. He gave up the right to be with his own family and his friends, so that others could enjoy that right.
Graham's older brother Tony gave a touching tribute to his brother, who was killed at the hands of Russian troops.
Software engineer, an author, and of course, living in Texas, he even became a sheriff's deputy at one point.
His older brother Tony.
Would you even believe he was a minister of the Church of Beer and could perform civil marriage ceremonies? One thing I want to impress upon everyone, especially those who knew him later life, or did not a lot more to Graham than his military or other adventures. Above, beyond, and before all the organisations, deeds, and uniforms that he was associated with, Graham was a son, a brother, an uncle, a friend, a dub who liked the simple things in life, like a bag of chips from the local chipper and a proper pint of Guinness.
A Ukrainian priest, Father Vasil, also spoke at the funeral mass in Our Lady Mother of Divine Grace Church in Raheny in Dublin. It came in a ceremony which volunteer fighter Irish attended to represent chosen company.
There is no greatest love to show to someone else than to lay down your life for the sake of others. Please remember that today, as we say goodbye to Graham in our grief, we truly express our love and for him. And we know that he will always remain and be, in our eyes, a hero who defended dignity, who defended freedom, who defended our homeland. Rest in peace.
I reached out to Dale's family to interview them about their loss. My emails were passed on by chosen company commander O'Leary. The Dale family didn't respond to my request to talk, and I can only imagine their grief was too raw. Since my visit to the memorial to fallen soldiers in Kyiv, 2 more Irishmen have become a casualty of the war. One is Alex Rizhuk, 20, from South Dublin, who went missing in action in early August 2024. He was a hero drone pilot in Ukraine's International Legion. It was reported that he had been fighting in Kyiv in eastern Ukraine when he went missing in action. In September 2024, another Irishman, Robert Deegan, was also killed fighting in Ukraine.
Let's just take a look at some of the words from the family tonight, in which they say they are extremely devastated for the loss of Robert. They say he made the ultimate sacrifice while staying true to his principles and character.
The 29-year-old from County Kildare was a former elite soldier of Ireland's Army Ranger Wing. It was reported that he was also killed fighting in Kyiv. Ireland is a militarily neutral country that is not a member of NATO and doesn't provide Ukraine with lethal military supplies. It has, however, openly supported Kyiv's right to fight off the Russian invaders. And in September 2024, Ireland's then Taoiseach, its Prime Minister, Simon Harris, travelled to Ukraine's capital.
Well, thank you very much, President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr. It's a great honour to stand with you here today in Kyiv, in Ukraine, and I thank you and your team for the warm welcome.
Harris met with Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, and Harris signed the Solidarity Agreement between Ireland and Ukraine. It put in writing Ireland's support for Ukraine to fight off Russia's invasion and backs Ukraine's goal to join the EU.
I wanted to be here today to say very clearly that Ireland will always stand with Ukraine, that Europe will always stand with Ukraine, and that both Ireland and the European Union will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And Ireland will never allow the war on Ukraine, the brutal Russian aggression, we will never allow that fade into the background. We will never allow that become normalised.
Ukraine's embassy in Dublin awarded slain Irish fighter Rory Mason a posthumous medal for bravery in January 2024. Ukraine's ambassador to Ireland, Lariska Garasko, wrote on the social media platform X, quote, "We admire and appreciate the courage and determination of Mr. Mason and all Irish people fighting for Ukraine," unquote. In light of the medal awarded to Mason, I was curious to know would other Irish fighters slain in Ukraine, such as Graham Dale, be due the same honour at some stage in the future. But I couldn't get a hold of the ambassador, Ms. Garasko. Emails I sent to Ukraine's embassy over several weeks failed to get replies, and no one ever answered the phone. I got tired of waiting and one day doorstepped the embassy in Dublin in Elgin Road and Ballsbridge.
Hiya. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm looking to do a media interview with the ambassador. I'm a journalist. I'm accredited with the military.
Sorry, I don't know. Listen, wait, okay?
Okay. You can say I emailed for a week and nobody replied to my email and nobody answered the phone. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm still waiting outside.
Despite the aide's assurances that the ambassador would give me a sit-down interview, or at least a phone call interview, as she had done before with the Irish media, my emails and calls continued to be unanswered. I could only conclude that it was awkward for the ambassador to again comment over an Irishman slain in Ukraine. Again being asked by a journalist what words did she have for a grieving family in Ireland who had lost a loved one in Ukraine. While on the embassy beat, I visited Russia's embassy across the city, here in Dublin in Orwell Road in Rathgar.
So I'm just walking by the Russian embassy in Dublin. It's been damaged on the outskirts there and the outside of the building. You can see the red marks where people have come up and sprayed it with graffiti.
In the early days of the war, a man reversed a truck through the gates of the embassy, and what he said was a protest over the invasion.
I love that. Well done. Well done.
In the trial in May 2024, a jury acquitted the man over a charge of dangerous driving. I had no interest in interviewing Russia's ambassador to Ireland, Yuri Filatov. He was famously interviewed by Irish national broadcaster RTE on the eve of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He trotted out Moscow's lie that there was no pending invasion of Ukraine, calling the idea ludicrous.
I don't think we have been misleading anyone.
Well, 10 days ago, sir, 10 days ago, you told Sarah McInerney on Primetime that claims of an imminent Russian invasion of Ukraine were ludicrous.
Days later, on February 24, 2022, Russia launched its brutal war in Ukraine.
It started before dawn. Ukraine woke to explosions around the capital, Kyiv.
Instead of talking to the ambassador, I was here to talk to the protesters. Here, the protesters are shouting at a car that is leaving the embassy. The activists have staged a daily, year-round protest against Russia's illegal war against Ukraine. I spoke to some of the protesters as to why they were demonstrating.
I came up initially because I was so outraged at the thought of tanks rolling over the border of a sovereign country in Europe. And what kept me here was the story of a woman in Mariupol. The Russian soldiers locked her into a potato cellar and they kept her there for we don't know how long. And we don't know how many times they came back and we don't know how many soldiers were involved. But she was found by her own people eventually. She was wearing a fur coat and nothing else. And she'd been shot in the head, and needless to say, she had been raped. And she is the reason I come here. She's my Ukrainian person, you know.
Ukraine's defense minister on Sunday accused Russian forces of an array of atrocities. Alexei Reznikov said the crimes came to light after Ukrainian forces moved into cities and towns after the invaders withdrew.
This is not a special operation. These are not police actions. These are ordinary racists, fascists, and inhumane who simply committed crimes against civilians. Raped, killed, shot them in the back of the head. The whole world needs to know about this.
Russia denies claims that its troops are behind the mass murder of civilians or the widespread rape of women and children in areas including Bucha and Mariupol. While at the Russian embassy, I wonder about the protesters' opinions of Irish people who take up arms for Kyiv.
What do you think about Irish people who go to Ukraine to fight? Do you think they're crazy for giving their lives for a war that's not our war, or do you think they're very brave?
Well, you see, I'd like to thank the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army for holding the war back from us. But the people who go out there, I think they're very brave and they're helping to hold the war back from the rest of Europe. So we owe them.
I finished talking to the protesters, but stayed briefly to listen to them sing Ukraine's national anthem. In February 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin's goal to take Kyiv in a 3-day so-called special military operation spectacularly failed. It came when Kyiv kicked the enemy out of the outskirts of its capital in just weeks, and Moscow's armies fled. Russia's forces have since regrouped, and now Moscow's military has since been making steady gains in the east of Ukraine along a front line of some 1,000 kilometers.
After nearly 3 years of fighting, death and destruction, Ukraine's president has admitted reluctantly
that his country may have to relinquish territory to Russia. In an interview with a French newspaper, he struck a thoughtful tone.
We cannot give up our territories. The Ukrainian constitution forbids us to do so, but we do not have the strength to recover them. We can only count on diplomatic pressure from the international community to force Putin to sit down at the negotiating table.
In Kyiv, volunteer fighter Irish tells us one major advantage Moscow's army has in the war is manpower. Volunteer fighter Irish recalls the battles he fought in Avdiivka, telling of Moscow's ease in losing its men.
The amount of force Russia concentrated there was ridiculous, and the amount of infantry. Our guys were put on a defensive, and Russians were driving up in BTRs, and one of our machine gunners was smashing the BTR with machine gun fire. And
what's a BTR?
BTR is a light armored vehicle. It's a armored personnel carrier. They drive up. They just carry troops, carry infantry, and they have a 30mm turret on top, so 30mm cannon, auto cannon. So that will fire like pretty rapidly. So they're just to move troops up to positions. There was BTRs driving up. Our machine gunner was hitting them. So there's like infantry on top of them, infantry in them, and the machine gunner was just smashing them, and lads were getting kicked out. You could see Russians getting kicked out the door at the back dead. So, and they just keep coming. They'll do that until the Ukrainians run out of ammunition. That night, someone counted on the drone footage. There was just from that position, I think there was 300 Russians dead in that field.
Just one day?
In one day, yeah.
So basically they're just used as meat?
Absolutely, they're just meat, and then to grind down the Ukrainians and just soak up ammunition. So especially if you don't have artillery and you're facing that many people, your ammunition's not gonna, your rifles aren't gonna last that long. This is an artillery war. I think probably 9 out of 10 deaths. Well, at least at the start, it's probably different with drones, but 9 out of 10 deaths are drones or artillery in this war. And if you don't have either or, if you're running out of either or, you can't really fight. And Ukrainians, they'll keep killing them, and then they'll run out of ammunition. They'll have to pull back, and it's constant because there's just so many Russian infantry that you can't fight against. Especially if you don't have the support and you don't have the logistics, there's not much you can do.
I mean, in combat, have you seen any of your men killed in the trenches?
Not in trenches. In villages, lads have died, yeah, but not to the extent that Russia, in comparison, the amount of our lads that have died is very small. And especially for the work we do, the amount of KA we've had is really, as it sounds bad to say, but it's really impressive that we haven't had more. I think it's down to training and just looking after each other.
But still, very difficult to see when your colleagues getting gunned down.
Yeah, always. But again, it's part of the job. Everyone comes here knowing the risk, and if your friends do die, of course it's tough. But you have to move on and then keep going for them.
You probably don't think much about it until maybe you get a break. You go back home to Ireland, and maybe it dawns on you.
I think you kind of do. If you go back and you've some big personalities, you'll come back off going back to our base or whatever, and there'll be big personalities missing. You do miss them. I don't know. I think you always do think about them, but you need to use it as any anger or any negative emotion. I think we were pretty good at using it as a tool to get back at them. It motivates us more to continue.
How do you feel about killing Russians? Did you see them as the enemy? How do you feel anything?
No, I don't. I don't give a fuck for them. If a Russian, and a lot of people's argument is they're forced, and yeah, maybe that's true, but I don't really give a fuck, and I've seen actions by the Russians that make me, I don't care for them. I don't know about the future, but right now I don't care. I couldn't care less about them, and it's a good thing to get rid of them. If you're here as a Russian in Ukraine, fuck you can die. After everything they've done, fuck them.
Russia eventually captured the eastern city of Avdiivka when it was lying in ruins in February 2024.
Ukraine's top military commander ordered troops to pull out of the besieged town on Saturday. giving Russia its most significant battlefield victory since taking Bakhmut in May 2023.
Many in Ukraine's army later said, however, that up to 30,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the battle for Avdiivka over several months. That meant even though Kyiv lost ground, it wore down Moscow's manpower. Although Ukraine was outmanned by Russia, Kyiv was also forced to pull back from Avdiivka because of the lack of firepower. Chosen Company Commander Ryan O'Leary told how they lacked artillery to hit Russia's advancing troops, forcing Kyiv's military to pull back.
We're still selectively using their artillery. Unlike the Russians, the Ukrainian military doesn't just, drop 6,000 rounds in one day on one spot. They're conservative, but now they're getting even more conservative because you don't know when you're going to get resupplied.
Early in the war, Moscow hit the Yavoriv military base, a facility outside Lviv in western Ukraine. At the time, it was said to have hosted some 1,000 foreign fighters of the then newly formed International Legion. They were in training to go to the front line. The attack on March 13, 2022, left some 35 dead and 134 injured, Kyiv said. Russia said the figures of the dead and injured were higher.
Western governments encouraging their citizens to enlist in Ukraine will be responsible for their death, the Russian Ministry of Defense said Monday.
Moscow considers foreign fighters illegal mercenaries and aims to capture them to bring about a prosecution. This comes despite the volunteer foreign fighters in Ukraine are signed up with the Ukrainian military rather than being in a regular force, and therefore are not mercenaries. In my reporting on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I met and interviewed another Irish fighter, Rhys Byrne. The 28-year-old Dubliner was then serving with the International Legion. I tracked him down after I found his name on the list of 400 foreign fighters in Ukraine that had been leaked to the Kremlin early in the war.
Yeah, the guards rang me, to notify me I'm on the kill list. Just to know that I was on a fucking, a death list and my information was out there. I was like, yeah, sure I do now. I have it tattooed on my arm, kill this crew, 50k. I was like, yeah, I know.
I secured the list from a Danish foreign fighter in Ukraine who was also on the dossier and believed there was a kill list. Diplomat Rhys Byrne's name was among the 14 Irish names, including one female, under the heading Ireland. The Danish fighter told me that Rhys had a $50,000 Russian bounty on his head.
It was $50,000 for the capture, basically, of anyone on that list that's a foreign fighter.
And so why do you think they would have you on that list?
They just got they just got basically names, and then they were like, right, well, let's try scare the foreigners from coming.
So basically, if you get caught on their Russian-held territory, for example, you're not a civilian, you're not a prisoner of war, is that right?
That's correct. If I get captured by the Russians, one, I'm guaranteed a very slow and brutal death. Guaranteed, because I'm covered in anti-Russian tattoos. So, if I get captured, they consider us war criminals.
No Irish on the so-called hit list have been captured or harmed that I am aware of. But they are hassled and threatened online, on various platforms, including Telegram. The list of foreign fighters dates back to late 2022. Since then, my military sources tell me that several Irish fighters on the list have since returned to Ireland. Now, in early 2025, volunteer fighter Irish said there remain somewhere between 10 to 20 Irish volunteer fighters in Ukraine. They are among what is estimated to be about 2,000 foreign fighters, waging war alongside Kyiv's troops to fight off Russia's invasion. That compares to the some 20,000 foreign fighters said to have enlisted in Ukraine in the first year of the war, which is now dragging into its third year.
The fighting does go on. It is grueling, vicious warfare.
The war on Ukraine's eastern front line remains a struggle. Kyiv depends on brave soldiers such as volunteer fighter Irish to hold the line. In Kyiv, Irish told me how he was just on a holiday in Ireland, but now that he is back in Ukraine, Irish is ready to get back to the war.
What does your family say to you about going back to Ukraine? You've already done a tour. Did they tell you to stay or go back?
They'll always want me to stay. I think they know by now that it's something I'm always going to do. I think they're better about it now. They can deal with it better.
Back in Ireland, there's a lot of right-wing movement at the moment, and
you know, the support for Ukraine, it seems to be dipping. And I presume you don't tell people that you're fighting in Ukraine.
No, my friends know, but it's not something I go around saying. People do have negative. I mean, most of what you said there, most of these people get their news from TikTok. I mean, their opinions don't really matter. If anyone does have like negative opinions, like fuck them. They get their news from TikTok. They'll scroll through social media all day and they'll come up with their fucking crazy conspiracies and they'll convince themselves it's real. They'll come up with their own opinions. I don't know what it's about. Maybe it's to be different or cool, but it seems to be going that way in Ireland at the minute. You know, it's not good, but these people's opinions don't matter.
There's tens of thousands of people killed over here. Are you confident you'll get out of here alive?
I'm confident in my own ability, and I'm confident in chosen company. Every one of our lads are some of the best lads, best fighters in this country, and they're the best blokes I've ever known. So I'm confident in my ability, and I'm confident in chosen company's ability, in all my mates' abilities. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. If something happens, it happens, and but that's you can't worry about it, or else you won't be able to perform well enough. So I don't really think about it. Again, I'm confident in my ability and the lads' abilities, so I will be grand. Like,
so there's a bit of an Irish contingency in this chosen company, I think.
There's a few of us, yeah. Again, all fucking great lads. They're some of the best guys as well, class. But yeah, we're all good to go. We'll keep fighting them.
Fuck me. Let's go!
The Fighting Irish in Ukraine, From the Frontline to Funerals, was reported, produced and written by me, Jeff Farrell. To see more of my work, visit my website, jefffarrellonline.com. The Irish fighter in Ukraine featured in this documentary with the codename Irish has been helped in Ukraine by the aid group Protect the Volunteer. To learn more and to give a donation, see protectthevolunteer.com. If you enjoy this documentary on the war in Ukraine, you might be interested in my audiobook, The Cocaine Diaries. It details a war of another kind. An Irish drug mule's struggle for survival in a prison in Venezuela where inmates fought battles armed with automatic weapons and grenades. You can listen to The Cocaine Diaries, a Venezuelan prison nightmare, as an audiobook on platforms including Spotify and Amazon's Audible.